India says it deployed elite troops to Pakistan-controlled Kashmir in an operation to kill suspected fighters. Pakistan denies India carried out the strike, saying 2 of its soldiers were killed in cross-border gunfire. Indian officials say the, quote, surgical strikes targeted fighters preparing to infiltrate the part of Kashmir under Indian rule. The raid was in retaliation to an attack on an army base in the town of Uri, which killed 18 Indian soldiers earlier this month.
The operations were basically focused to ensure that these terrorists do not succeed in their design of infiltration and carrying out destruction and endangering the lives of citizens of our country. During these counter-terrorist operations, significant casualties have been caused to the terrorists and those who are trying to support them.
Well, joining us live now from the United Nations is Pakistan's ambassador to the UN, Maleeha Lodhi. Madam Ambassador, welcome to the programme and thanks for being with us. India says its elite forces went across the border to kill militant fighters on the Pakistani side. Why would India lie about such an operation?
Because India is trying to divert international attention and attention in its own country from the war crimes it is committing in occupied Kashmir, where more than 100 people have been killed in cold blood by Indian forces. So India is trying to provoke a crisis with Pakistan in the hope that it can divert attention and calm domestic opinion, because I think domestic opinion is also increasingly questioning the Indian government about its role in Kashmir, where over 150 children and women and men have been blinded by the use of pellet bullets. My country has exercised maximum restraint in the face of what happened in the early hours of Thursday. In the early hours of Thursday, what we saw was cross-border shelling by mortar fire as well as small arms fire. We have captured an Indian soldier who was trying to cross, and 2 of our soldiers have been killed and martyred in this kind of cross-border shelling. But there was no surgical strike inside territory controlled by Pakistan. And for India to act so irresponsibly, and that too when there are 2 nuclear neighbors that have to deal with these issues in a peaceful way, we think is hugely irresponsible. We think the international community should urge restraint upon India.
But, Madam Ambassador, the suspicion of some analysts is that you're denying any such strike on Pakistan's side of the border because Pakistan would consider such an attack to be something like an act of war, and Pakistan doesn't want things to escalate. So it's easier to deny that, that there was such an attack by the Indian forces.
First of all, I think in this day and age, no country can deny an attack that takes place within its own territory or territory that it controls. I think for us, we want the international community to know that we are exercising maximum restraint. But if India continues with the kind of provocations that it has been engaged in, that Pakistan is ready to respond with all the capabilities at its command.
What does that mean?
What that means is that if there's any attempt, because already we see unusual movement along the border, along the line of control which divides the 2 Kashmirs, and we see unusual movement, even tanks, across what is called the working boundary between India and Pakistan. There are reports, credible reports, of areas being evacuated on the Indian side. If all of these are preparations for something ominous, like crossing the border, then obviously Pakistan will respond. No country will allow its territory to be invaded by another country. So we will be ready to respond.
Is the 2003 Kashmir ceasefire at risk right now?
Well, yes, of course it's at risk, because our Prime Minister offered to India several times, even in his speech to the General Assembly last year, that Pakistan was ready to formalize this into a formal agreement, the ceasefire on the line of control. India has declined to respond. So at this point in time, India's belligerence is what poses a threat to regional peace, and it also poses a threat to international peace and security. I will be meeting with senior UN officials tomorrow morning. I've started some of the meetings today to ensure that the international community knows the facts on the ground and doesn't allow India to escape responsibility for what it is doing in Kashmir, and also escape responsibility for trying to provoke a conflict with Pakistan. Pakistan will not be drawn into a conflict, but Pakistan will be ready to respond if India decides to provoke an action that is across the border.
Well, the US has already urged India and Pakistan to calm things down to avoid an escalation in this dispute. You say you're meeting with UN officials. What exactly, though, do you want the UN to do to try to calm the situation? What are you expecting from the United Nations?
Well, two things. I mean, first of all, the UN has long-standing obligations to ensure that the disputed area of Kashmir, the people there are given their right to self-determination. There is a plebiscite that was promised by the United Nations, by members of the Security Council. They need to live up to their obligations. Secondly, we would like the international community, we would like the United Nations to play a role in diffusing tensions and not wait for a full-blown crisis to occur. The time to avert a crisis is before a crisis. And I think India's efforts to provoke a crisis is something that the international community should respond to quickly and with urgency. But as far as my country is concerned, we are confident. We know what we need to do to respond should India up the ante. But we do believe that two nuclear neighbors should try to resolve their differences peacefully through dialogue. But it is India that has suspended the dialogue. It refuses to talk. All it is doing is talking in the language of conflict and war. And that is not something that Pakistan wants. But at the same time, Pakistan wants to ensure that the people of Kashmir, who were promised a plebiscite, they were promised that they would be able to determine their destiny, that promise has not been kept.
Maleeha Lodhi, we are out of time. I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And we did invite the Indian UN ambassador to appear on the programme as well, but he was not available.